Hi, everybody. This is Mike Stover. I'll be moderating ACX University's Taking Your Career to the Next Level. I am the ACX Director and General Manager. I'm here with Jamie Matler, John McElroy, Kat Lambrix. So let me go over just who everyone is. Jamie Matler has spent 6 years working in voiceover as an engineer, director, casting agent, and producer. In this time, she's recorded over 500 audiobooks and narrated roughly 40 herself. She was one of the founding engineers at the SAG-AFTRA Foundation's EIF Voiceover Lab, coaching and directing actors on the art of voiceover. Some audiobooks she's recorded include the Grammy-nominated American Grown, written and narrated by Michelle Obama, the Audio Award-winning The Handmaid's Tale, narrated by Claire Danes, and the Audio Award-nominated A Rage in Harlem, narrated by Samuel Jackson. Jamie has worked on titles for Audible, Harlequin, Penguin Random House, Simon & Schuster, Recorded Books, Harper, and ACX. Currently, she works as the producer-director for Blackstone Publishing and Downpour.com, one of the nation's largest independent audiobook publishers. Moving on to John McElroy. John McElroy runs Elgin Productions, Inc. He's a producer and a director for more than 20 years. He's won Grammy Awards and an Audiobook Hero Award, and he's been involved in about 1,500 to 2,000 audiobook productions. That's a lot, my friend. He's excited about a new project, a talent acquisition project management platform, which takes a lot of his time these days. He was surprised to learn that Elgin is the largest payer of SAG-AFTRA audiobook talent in the country. Who knew? And then lastly, Kat Lambrix is a senior producer for the Grammy Award Audible Studios. Kat started her career 12 years ago, producing museum audio tours until discovering audiobooks in 2006. Kat's most recent productions include directing Mahershala Ali in the audiobook edition of the upcoming film Free State of Jones. Welcome, everyone. So let's get started. I'm going to ask some panel questions, start talking about how you guys discover new talent, try to educate our people that are watching this on, what's the best way to receive submissions and what they should be thinking of. So, Kat, starting with you. How does Audible Studios discover new talent? Do they seek it out? Do you wait for submissions?
So we do a little bit of both. We go to industry events. We meet people at APAC, at Mixers. We talk amongst ourselves as producers, which is why it's really exciting to be here with these guys today. When we have a specific need is generally one of the times when we reach out, if it's a language or an accent need. But we also take submissions. We take cold calls. People, email sort of the general narrators at Audible email address. And we go through that stuff. We love recommendations, especially from existing narrators and producers. And that's one of the things I love best about our industry is that it's a really friendly place to work where if you're good, if you've got the talent, doesn't matter who you are, who you know, somebody's going to pass you along to a producer that they know. And it's a very friendly industry, and it's really easy for folks to break into it. So those are some of the ways that we find new talent, but we're always looking.
Jamie, how about you? How does this compare to Blackstone? How do you discover new talent?
I would say it's similar. I would say some producers like getting lots of cold emails. I don't prefer cold emails. I'm very much a fan of building relationships and recommendations from people. I think a lot of people who are ready to be working at the professional level, like their names are on people's lips, and we start to talk. And Kat and I email with a lot of people, and I really like that.
I think networking is going to be a very common theme. We're going to dive definitely into that. John, let's talk about your model. It's a bit different. Tell us a little bit about that. How do you maintain your roster? Just get into a little bit about yourself, more than your bio.
Well, I would say this, that I'm really not going to be able to add anything that anybody's said thus far. I would say that just jumping a little out of this, I've been working for the last year and a half on a way of trying to create a networked marketplace in which various kinds of people, from audiobook narrators and other kinds of vendors, editors, studios, we can bring people together. It seems to me that that will open up more opportunities for people, particularly the kinds of people working for ACX. People working for ACX are technologically hip and savvy. You've been producing a lot of your own work, and you're clearly looking to find a kind of a neutral marketplace for being able to be found. And rather than, all of us, I know, are at least a little bit afraid of getting lots of unsolicited email. I would say that I probably have to deal with 150 emails a day. Probably don't want a heck of a lot more of that.
So what's the best? Certain ones stand out from the others. Certain ones are just emails that come through, and it could be a quick delete because it just doesn't have what you're expecting or what the minimum amount is to be expected. Can we talk a little bit more about specifics on what should they be doing to highlight themselves best?
Well, I'm sure we all have our. We'll be able to speak to that. Here's what I would say. First of all, don't try to do everything. Pick a genre that you're comfortable with. Give us a nice 2-minute tops, for me, clip of what it is you're trying to show us. Don't try to do everything. You're not going to get hired for everything. If you're very good at romance, give us romance. If you're very good at nonfiction, give us nonfiction. Don't try to push yourself too much. You'll be most impressive when you pick something you're very comfortable with.
Do you guys agree? Kat and Jamie?
Yeah, I
Anything to
would say specificity is really important. Someone who says they're great at all accents isn't really helpful. Someone who says they're great at Russian accents, I will think of them if I need a Russian accent. So I think specificity is absolutely key. And brevity. I don't need to know everything about you. We're busy people. John's getting 150 emails a day. He doesn't want to read a novel. So I would say, keep it brief, keep it friendly, and really tell us, what you think you're great at, where you would fit into the industry.
It's funny because, we've talked about this, and I see that there's definitely unique aspects of this to the industry, but there's a lot of pitching yourself that goes along in any industry. Like LinkedIn comes around, has a template set up for you that follows a resume. There's other sites. There's ACX, which has your credits, awards, recognitions, things like that. People do try to get you to follow a specific template, and it sounds like that should be the case in order to make it succinct. Specifically to the audio aspect of it, you mentioned how you should talk about the genres that you're really intrigued in, and I guess you could have mentioned the ones that the genres that you're prolific at, and then you could also mention the ones that you're intrigued in that you may be moving on to as well. When you get an audition from them, when you get specific auditions from them, are you looking to see, the ones that they're really prolific in? Is that the ones that they should lead with? Or should you get a wide array of their talent?
I would actually say to templatize things is not at least what I'm looking for. So
Okay.
we get a lot of people sending their newsletters, and that's great, and it's fantastic that you can stick some pictures in there and you can address the wide audience, but especially if it's the first time you're contacting your producer, it should be more personal because we do get 150 emails a day. And if it's something that you're just blasting out to everyone, then I'm not quite sure why I should really read it and pay attention to it. But if you're referencing someone who's referred you to me, or if you have a really specific accent that you're great at, that's super helpful. So to see that someone has taken time with an email and not just blasted me amongst 50 other producers actually really does make a difference.
Okay. So we've talked about the cold emails, and I think we can segue into how it's really good to build relationships, networking with people, so that, when you come across a new talent that's new to you, knowing someone that knows that talent is paramount. I think it's fantastic. So I think we need to empower people to do networking. Can you guys talk about, Jamie, you can go first, where you see the best way is for the average or the stellar or the beginner audiobook narrator, how they can get into networking?
Networking, I think, is absolutely key in this industry. And I don't like to think about it specifically as like networking. It's work. It should be about building relationships, friendships with people, things that may not even pan out in the next month or the next year. But sometimes you build a relationship with somebody and a couple years down the line, they're in a position to help you out. So it really is about building positive relationships with people. You can do that at APAC. You can do that at Mixers. You can communicate in online groups. You can start your own group in your community where all the audiobook narrators who are holed up in their studios at home get together to talk with each other, who they're working for, what they're working on. You can also take classes and get coaching from people. If you take classes from people, they are usually connected in a way where if you're really good, they can help connect you and pass your name along to other people. Anything you do to get out of your house and meet with other people is positive.
Yep, getting out of the home studio a bit and then making sure that you use a percentage of the amount of time you're dedicated to the craft to actually network is good.
Right, and you can also be generous with your own time. I mean, the folks who are listening in are doing work in ACX, and so they do have a talent or a specialty or something, and if you put it out there that you're offering to help people with what it is you're good at, they're going to respond in kind, and you can ask for a recommendation or an introduction or an email for yourself. And it's not about getting something for you, but it's about being generous with your talent and what you know as part of the industry.
And as a small industry, the audiobook industry is itself pretty generous. I think you'll find, Jamie gave us a fairly exhaustive list of the kinds of networking that you can do. And part of what she was talking about is finding, you talked about a coach, I'd say more broadly, a mentor. And there are plenty of people who are willing to, if you send them a flattering and an honestly flattering email that says, "Look, I've always enjoyed what you do. Would you listen to this piece that I've done, and what do you think of it?" I think many well-established narrators will actually give you a nod, and it's that kind of building of mentorship, connection that's quite helpful.
It goes back to the old adage of "don't be a jerk." And it's
I've never heard that one.
Well, John,
It's a classic, John.
Talk to you about that. But be generous, be a decent person, hold the door for the person behind you, because you never know if it's the casting director for the audition you're walking into.
What about paying it forward? Someone who's gone through that whole process, it's natural to hopefully want to give back. Do you see a lot of people doing that and actually learning from that as well?
Absolutely. I've seen people trading acting classes. You take mine, I'll take yours. I see people giving introductions all the time and doing coaching in all kinds of situations, from can I take you out for a coffee and can you help me with this accent that I'm having trouble with, to will you coach me formally, I'll pay you for it. But I think folks really, they know what it is to go through that ringer and that gamut of things you go through to get into this industry, and they want to help other people have an easier time with that.
And again, if you're viewing all of your networking as building friendships with people, you give to someone, they give back to you. That never ends. I went freelance 3.5 years ago, and Eileen Stevens has been sending me work when things come up. She's been very helpful to me. And I started working for Blackstone about 6 months ago, and when they hired me, they said, "Who's one of your favorite narrators to work with?" And I said, "Eileen Stevens." And now she's done 2 books for Blackstone so far since I've been hired. This sort of reciprocal relationship just continues on and on throughout your career.
And when you get to know someone personally, you get to know what are they interested in, what do they know a lot about, what are they good at, what languages do they speak. And that's very different than just getting an email from someone saying, "I speak 7 languages." But if you know functionally that, hey, Jamie Matler speaks really good French, that's going to be something that's going to be more helpful as a producer and to you as a narrator, to have people know on a personal level that you're for real with this.
I think it's a good idea. We wanted to talk about people going to mixers and representing themselves, and people sending cold emails and representing themselves. Do you guys think that you should do it almost in a similar way? We were talking about being succinct in your emails. If you go into a mixer and you're hobnobbing with people, do you see any differences there in terms of how to interact with them? Or is it rather similar than you should always pitch yourself in the same way?
I think it's similar. A lot of times I see people talking about the other kinds of acting work they're doing, which is great. But if I'm just meeting you as a producer, that's not helpful. Tell me about your audiobook work. Don't tell me about, the scene that you were in Pirates of the Caribbean. That's less helpful to me when I'm casting you in a project. Fun to know. But if we're meeting and we only have 5 minutes because we're at a mixer and it's loud and I need to move on, keep it to what I need to know about you, please.
Okay. What about the audiobook reel? What it should consist of? We talked earlier about how your best genres and things that you worked on. Anything else that the reel should have?
No.
Okay. Simple
no. I'm kidding. I don't know, Jamie. What do you think?
I think if you want to cover a lot of different things in a succinct way, make sure we can hear a long passage of straight narration. Make sure we can hear dialogue with 2 or 3 different characters, preferably male and female. Make sure we can hear fiction and nonfiction, and hit your best genres.
Excellent. Great. Okay. So you are your voice, you are your production, you are the work that you do in audio, but you're also your social media presence. Can we just speak a little bit about that as well?
Yeah. So Jamie and I were actually legitimately talking about this before we started this panel, about how it is really important to be out there and to be a person who represents yourself professionally and does it well. And when we go out and look for people, or when we have somebody coming into audition, like, yeah, you Google people, of course. If you're going to hire somebody, you Google them. And to see that they're out there and putting their best professional foot forward is really important. And Jamie, do you want to talk a little bit about the pseudonym issue on social media? Because I think that's an excellent point that you made today.
Yeah, so there is a problem where obviously there's a lot of people using pseudonyms, myself included, and when a producer wants to find you, it's really difficult. So not just having an acting page for yourself, but having websites for your pseudonyms. It can be really simple. A couple books you've done, maybe some samples, and your email address, so that people aren't emailing and all over the place. Because Kat and I were emailing yesterday trying to find a narrator, and that's loss of work if we can't find you.
Yeah, we want to give this narrator work, and hopefully, we can find her and get to her. But, if she and all of these other narrators who have pseudonyms out there would just a simple way to find you, and it doesn't even have to be, I'm Kat Lambrix and here is my pseudonym. It can be, here's my pseudonym. You can contact me through mypseudonym@gmail.com and just check it every once in a while. I mean, okay to act like your pseudonym is a real person, as long as you keep that up professionally.
And have that email address just forward to your regular email.
Yeah, just an anecdote as a warning. It took me, I think, about 10 days to find a particular person. And quite frankly, if there hadn't been some push on the part of the publisher, I would never have gone to those lengths. And just last week, I was looking for a pseudonym. I couldn't find the person. Said, do somebody else. Just grab somebody else off the list. And that happens. So simply to underscore what Kat and Jamie have been saying, just make sure that you have some place where people can get in touch with that pseudonym.
Do you think if for the pseudonym presence online, we mentioned a Gmail address, email address, you could go as far as a unique social media presence as well, a unique website as well. I guess that's how far you are into the pseudonym, like how much work you're doing through the pseudonym. Is that correct?
Yeah, people are doing it with Facebook pages too. And we did a project a few years ago where we were asked to provide headshots and bios for narrators for projects that they were using pseudonyms for. And we went through maybe 15 or 20 narrators, and I worked with them to get great headshots that maybe weren't necessarily them and weren't even of their faces, but they took it very seriously, which I appreciated. It made my job a lot easier, and I think it also makes these authors feel a lot better. Here's someone who is taking this very seriously and who has established this presence and can do this work, especially when you're talking about stuff that you use a pseudonym for. When you're talking about romance and erotica, it's important to take it seriously and to let the authors know that this is serious for me. It's not just a side part of what I do. It's part of what I do.
And remember that if you're looking for work outside of ACX, that's how the publishers are going to find you. They're going to find you by searching for X pseudonym, and they will find your website or your social media presence in some other platform. That's what if you're trying to break out of and get a wider array of experience, that's how you do it.
And I would recommend strongly to link to your audiobook samples on Audible. Have them on your site as well if you have them. But just remember, your presence is online in different locations, so make sure you have one place to get them all together. It makes it easier for the people that are researching you. It makes it easier for those people that are responding to your cold email. It makes it easier for you if you met somebody at a networking event to go back and look, and that fleet of time it's fleeting, the amount of time that they spend on it. Great. Okay. So one thing, just to move back on, do you have any good examples of people who do a really good job at their social presence or just pitching or networking? Anyone you want to call out specifically, or am I putting you guys on the
Jeez,
in the
Mike.
light?
I think in terms of being generous and paying it forward and always passing on a good recommendation, even if it's someone who has her exact skill set, is Gabra Zachman. Gabra is always sending us new narrators that she's worked with, and from places she's working around the country. And she'll send an email, but she won't send 6 emails a month. So she kind of hits it just right.
Okay.
I think sometimes even just keeping in touch with somebody without trying to get work can be really good too. I received an email from, oh my goodness, the name just left my brain. A.T. Chandler. And he sent me an email last week. We did director diagnostics together at APAC, and we talked about some things. He wrote me an email, and he said some of the things we discussed were really helpful, and he was getting great feedback from his clients, and it was helping him get more work. And it's really great. We don't live in the same city, but maintaining that relationship with me without expecting anything from me.
Okay. Great. So some of the audience questions make sense. Any tips on how to find these mixers? John, you talked about a networking tool that's maybe upcoming, but anything that you guys can recommend on how individuals may be able to find certain mixers or even start them up, whether it's through Meetup, as I mentioned before, or some other method by looking into talking to people on ACX. People can do that as well. Any other ideas?
Well, I mean, the obvious idea is join the Audio Publishers Association.
Oh.
Isn't that an unexpected?
That's good. Novel.
I really pulled that one out. What is it? audioPub.org. You'll find it there, and you should join it, because if you're interested in finding the mixers coast to coast, I believe, there's New York, Chicago, and Los Angeles. They may have had others elsewhere. I don't know of them, but that's the kind of thing you should do, and that'll give you a fair feed on the various audiobook events. Do you know anything further about networking events?
I guess one thing people could do, because a lot of ACX members are a part of the Facebook group ACX Narrators and Producers, you could organize your own local organizations and groups for meetups in your cities just by posting on that page where everybody's already talking and communicating with each other.
Great. Yeah, that's excellent. So let's step back a little bit. If you guys started brand new in the industry, I don't know how many years I mentioned in your bio when I read about them in the beginning, but they add up. You guys have been doing a lot in the audiobook industry. What would be the first things that you would work on? I'm brand new. I'm getting into this industry. What's the first thing I think? And you guys should all go separately with separate answers, by the way.
No,
So
I
say
think
the same thing.
I think they told me to put my mic down because I'm not allowed to talk anymore. No, I'm kidding. If I were starting as
Starting
narrator,
out brand new.
as a
Yes.
narrator,
Yes.
I would listen a lot. I'd listen to everyone. I'd listen to all the featured narrators. I'd listen to the narrators that I like, and I'd listen to stuff that I don't like in genres that I don't particularly like. I mean, we tend to gravitate towards what it is we enjoy, but when you're out there as a narrator, you're going to be getting books that aren't necessarily something you enjoy, something you might find dry or boring or insipid. So listen to that, listen to the people who do it really, really well, and then record yourself and listen back. And when you come across things that you can't fix yourself, go get some coaching, go ask for some help.
So I think that's a valuable tip, because we want to talk to people that are more established. I think it's always good to question yourself as you become more established and always look back on certain things. Is the coaching aspect something that you would recommend even as you progress throughout the year?
I think some of the
Throughout
best
your career.
narrators continue to get coaching all the time. I know when Katie Kilgren encounters an accent that she's not 1,000% sure on, which I'm not sure how that's possible because she does some of the best accents I've ever heard. But I know she'll call a coach, and I think that's extremely smart to say, here's something that I'm not confident with, but I know how to get confident with. I know how to get there. So I think that the best narrators, continue to learn all the time.
Great. Okay, any big red flags that you can think of? Whether it's in positioning yourself, whether it's in your online social presence, whether it's in the reel, anything that you've seen, no specifics probably in terms of people, but anything that you've seen that may be a big red flag that you could tell people, don't do this.
One of the social media can be a real problem when you simply take it upon yourself to announce what it is that you're doing. Certain rights holders, certain publishers are absolutely delighted that you're going to go out there and talk about what it is that you're doing. Others are not particularly happy for you to do that. So you need to be sensitive to the to your client and always test the water. Ask them, look, here's what I have in mind. Would you mind if I did this on my Facebook page? And don't be surprised if, although many of them will say, fantastic, just do it, you will actually find publishers that say, no, we got this one. You really shouldn't do anything until this is fully published, and then you can talk about it. It can really get people in trouble, and they don't realize that they've actually put their foot on the third rail, and they're frying. Some publishers get absolutely ruffled by it. So be careful on that. Just ask for permission to do it.
Jamie, Kat?
I would say when you are writing on online forums, be nice to people. Even if people aren't responding to the things you're writing, they might be reading them and you never know who's reading them. So always be gracious and kind online.
See, it goes back to don't be a jerk.
It does.
Started that at the beginning.
I think another red flag that we see sometimes are folks who send their commercial reel. Super interesting that you're doing commercial work, not relevant to what we're doing. So if you don't have any professional audiobook work, take a couple minutes and record something and present it as if it were a professional project. The other side of that, though, that I've seen is people who choose really well-known books. You probably don't want to choose Harry Potter as your sample. That's, or another iconic work like that we know what it sounds like, because there are definitive audiobook editions
That's a good tip.
of. And I've seen both sides of that, but people who choose things that are very appropriate for them and their voice, that's always going to serve you best as a narrator, representing yourself and putting yourself out there in the world.
So one question I didn't get to, but I think it's relevant here, is there's probably not a hard and fast number in terms of how many samples that you'll have or audio bits that you'll have in order to share. Would you say, don't come at me unless you have at least 3 or anything like that? Or can you suggest how wide should the repertoire be?
I think at least 2 is helpful. But what I really love is when somebody has a link to their website and they've got a variety of samples. And even if your commercial work is on there alongside your audiobook work, that I don't care about. Great to have it up there. But if I can go in and listen to samples on your site and I can pick and choose what I'm listening to in terms of what I'm casting, that's extremely helpful.
As opposed to getting a real clip, which can be a problem. So, as you say, link, not clip, as far as I'm concerned.
I'm not concerned with how much work someone has done. There are plenty of people who've done a lot of books, and I don't care for their narration. And there are people who haven't done a ton of books, and I think they're fantastic. I think Michael Crouch is doing some really great work. I think Michael DXTEL is doing some really great work. And these are guys who have, I think Michael DXTEL has 12 books out. Not very many, but he sounds fantastic. So I think it's really about being great at your craft and not putting out tons of quantity without getting people to help you get better. I think a huge mistake is people who think, I can do this on my own, so I only do this on my own. You should seek out engineers and directors to help you with your work, coaches, and it doesn't matter where you live. Paul Rubin does Skype coaching. Carol Mondo does Skype coaching. I've done phone coaching for a narrator out in Hawaii. There are a lot of people who, if you reach out, they will be happy to help you no matter where you live.
Great. That's great. I wanted to get a little more into after that. You know, we talked about your online presence, how to pitch yourself, whether it's on email, in person. I wanted to talk a little bit more about, you know, now you're in, what's the day of the life in each studio? But before we go there, is there anything that you know, we may have missed in terms of the pitch aspect to it? Is there anything I want to add? If not, we can just move directly in. Any
One
last
thing.
thoughts?
One thing. Yeah. Even if I know you, if we end up in a social situation, it's cool to let me know something that you like. Again, it doesn't have to be like I'm looking for work. I need work. When I was at APAC, I was talking with Emily Wu Zeller, and she gets hired to do a lot of Chinese stuff. And I was like, "But what do you like?" And she's like, "Ooh, I love spies." And I love doing books with like nonfiction with like statistics and money. I'm like, that is helpful.
Mm-hmm. Do
So,
what you love
do what you love, and then tell me what you love. Because if you love it, you're going to narrate it
and
better.
collaborate well that way.
Yeah.
That's good. Question from the audience is, should the audition be as good as the finished work? Thoughts? Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Please enunciate that.
Yes. You want me to elaborate?
Please elaborate.
Yeah, because your audition is representative of the final product that you're going to be sending to someone. So, I mean, if you recorded an audition in your bathroom, I'm going to focus on that and not what you sound like. So, I mean, it doesn't have to be, you know, fully produced with music, but it, you know, you also shouldn't have any errors in there. You shouldn't need to do any pickups for your audition.
Agreed
what do you
all
guys
around?
think?
One shot style? Okay.
Done.
All right, let's assume that they've got in and you're working directly with these people. What's a day in the life, Kat? How does it see? What's a normal day in the life look like?
Oh, me first. Day in the life of the Audible Studios narrator is a fantastic one. It depends on whether you're recording with us or at home. If you're recording with us, you're going to come in, you're going to hang out with us. We've got an awesome space for you to come and see and have great coffee. You're going to be in our studios. You're going to work with our director engineers who are fantastic. And you're going to work hard, but have a place that really values that what you're doing. You are going to have prepped your book. And I feel like I hit this in
You're
every
getting in
single ACX panel I do. You're going to have read your book. You're going to have read your whole book. You're going to have read every word in your whole book.
So one of the
And
questions I have is, who does
you're
the
gonna-
research?
You're
and
going to
that-
know how to say all those words.
Right.
That's the really important part. For us, we ask our narrators to do the research. We ask them to reach out to our authors, introduce themselves. Do you have any notes? Are there any pronunciation issues? What do you think of your characters? And sometimes the author won't even get back, and that's fine. Sometimes they'll say, I don't care, whatever. Or, you know, oh, I love your work. You totally got this. You know, there's nothing I can tell you. Or they're going to say, yeah, I made up this language, and it kind of sounds like Klingon, but with a little bit of Irish thrown in. So here's how I want you to say
I
all
don't know
these
that song.
words. Yeah, no, you speak that, don't you, John?
I do. Fluently.
So we put that on our narrators, but we also hire the best director engineers so that they can help out with those questions and things like that. And for a home studio narrator, the expectation is much the same, with the added expectation of due dates and delivering things, you know, on time and in the right format.
So how much time is given to turn a book around? What's the magic number?
On average, we like stuff back in 2 weeks. Because we try and move through things really quickly and get stuff out there and up for our listeners. But generally, we can be flexible on dates, which is something that I think a lot of our narrators know, but not everyone. And I think it's always okay if you're booked up with other work or if you feel like you really can't do something justice in the time that you're given, ask for more time because the answer is usually yes. And if you don't ask, you're not going to know.
Well, the caveat I would give there is this: that a lot of the trade book publishers are working on simultaneous release of print and audiobook. So there isn't that much room to navigate around that. You really do have to. If somebody says the due date is X, the chances are very strong that the due date should be X minus 5. That they're always pushing up to the last possible moment. So on some things we can be more forgiving, but on many productions we've got the deadlines panting down our necks.
Do you recommend focusing on one narration at a time? Or do you know people that do well at multitasking, given these strict deadlines?
I think there are people who can, I'll do 3 hours on this today, and I'll do another 3 hours on this other one today. That's a good question, though. Can someone?
I think sometimes you don't have a choice.
There you
If
go.
you're dealing with working not just in your home studio, but you're getting booked at other places, and it's your availability against a studio's availability, there's definitely people who end up working on multiple books in multiple locations over a week or 2 week period.
I know some narrators will prep one book at night while they're recording another book during the day, but in terms of headspace, especially if it's something tough that you're working on, you might want to stick to one thing at a time, just so you're head down and you're straight ahead on that, and then you're done. Boom, send it off to your editor. Let's move on to the next one if you have the time. But I think Jamie and John make really excellent points that sometimes you don't, and you have to roll with the punches.
Are you able to tell if their mindset's a little off? Because
Always.
Of that? Yeah, you can pull it right in.
Sometimes. I mean, some narrators are just so great that they could be, half asleep while they're reading, and we probably wouldn't know because they're so talented. But let's not find out who's not that good. So let's not try it, please.
You can actually hear the mannerisms taking over. You hear the voice comes up in the middle, and then it falls down. And it's the formulaic presentation of each sentence where you can feel that half of the brain is really asleep and the mouth is moving. So it happens rarely, but you definitely can feel the disengagement happen.
I wouldn't say it happens rarely. I would say a lot of people.
I'm trying to be nice, Jamie.
Don't be a jerk. No,
Been found out, John.
No, I would say a lot of times when people record only at home and they aren't checking in with that engineer director, they start to be like, okay, I've got this much time. I've got to get the work done. And yes, we know your voice sounds beautiful. And then we start to hear a rhythm and we start to hear you doing this. And yes, your voice sounds nice, but we don't talk in rhythms when we talk to each other. So, yeah, I mean, I would say a lot of people who work from home that I've coached and directed have that problem, and then it becomes breaking that habit. So when they go back to their home studio, they can engage with the material the same way that we expect engagement when you're working in a pro studio with an engineer and a director.
So how do you break that, Jamie?
You tell them they're doing it, and then you tell them to stop.
No, I know as a producer how you break that. No, but how as a narrator?
How does a narrator? And again, this is, you can't be an island. You can't stay at home by yourself all the time. You have to seek help. And if that means that you get a book on ACX and you go, okay, I haven't worked with an engineer director before or in a long time. I'm going to take this per finished hour rate that I have and pay someone to engineer and direct me on this book and take a pay cut for myself, because that's basically like taking a class but doing work, and then you kind of break even at the end. But it helps get those skills better. So when you do your next book at home, you've sort of hit the reset button and you've gotten new skills and new education for your next book.
I will say, as a listener, I've heard that. I've heard that rhythm and that kind of tuned outedness, and it's frustrating because when you're listening, you've bought a book, you've spent money, or you've spent your Audible credit that month on a book, and that's what you've got for that month. And if you hear a narrator doing something like that, it can be frustrating. You're thinking, I chose to spend my one book this month on you, and you're not tuned into this, and that's tough for me. So I think in order to do justice both to the book and to our listeners who have developed these sort of affinities for certain narrators, and they'll listen to certain books because, Lauren Fortgang narrated this, so
right.
I don't care what it is, I'll listen to it.
Right.
I think it's important to remember that too. Who's listening to this in the end? Who's your real audience?
So what about peer reviews? Have you seen success in that? I can imagine, there's so many ACX narrators and producers out there. I'm sure there's a time when some have pitched a sample to others and gotten great feedback and negative feedback. I guess, what are your thoughts? Do you have any examples of where you've seen success there I can speak to it too.
Oh, yeah. You know what's great about what a lot of our narrators are now doing? They're also directing. I know Peter Ganem does a lot of directing. Christine Vam does a lot of directing. And they're able to give that feedback from a perspective that really knows what they're doing, and they know how to fix things like boots on the ground. And they're very focused with their feedback, and I think that they can help other narrators really quickly. And I think it's a give and take. It's the same thing we keep coming back to. If you're giving of this and your expertise, it's going to come back to you. So I think it's been a really successful thing. And even less formally, if you say to someone, hey, you're really good at this accent and my book's got that, it's only a minor character, but I need your help with this. I think that's been really successful.
Someone that they look up to or that they're trying to emulate, having that person be a peer review, I think would be extremely a great idea to do, especially on ACX. And there's been some questions about how do I engage more and network even more. I think that's one way to do it. Do it with your work. Do it with showing off and getting feedback from others. I think that's a great way to network and network through the actual sample that you have. I don't know, any other points there?
One of the things that Kat said very early in the discussion is the necessity of listening to lots of other work and people whose work you really respect. You're not getting immediate feedback, but you are expanding your sense of the resources that are out there. You're getting a sense of, wow, Edward Herman does this in an especially good way. How does he do that? Or Barbara Rosenblatt does X. It's an engagement with the self as well as others, and it's if you're a music aficionado, you do the same kind of thing.
Yeah. I would build on that and say it's important not just to listen to people who are great. Okay, we're going to listen to people who are great, and we feel good, and they make us feel good, and then we get lost in the story. It's important to listen critically, and that means also listening to other audiobooks and saying, this narrator isn't as great as Scott Brick or George Guidall. Why? What are they missing? And then listen to yourself and say, what am I missing? Am I similar to this, or am I in the right direction? So listening to all different kinds of narrators and saying, what's there that's great, and then what's missing that I can bring to the table in my next narration.
Can you get into a little bit of specifics about you work with really talented narrators, but you're directing them, and they're not always going to be exactly perfect. Is there anything that you can think of that you could say, I frequently get people to do this even though they're stellar. Anything like, I want you to go back and, to your point, listen to someone else, or is that too in their face at this point? Are they too well off at this point? What are some common things that you do in terms of directing people, and some critiques that you give, even if they're at a stellar level?
Well, the first thing you have to do is cast it correctly. And you're not going to find yourself, talking to a dog and saying, how's your meow? And you often find, I've often been in passing rooms and listening to something that's not going well. And the reason it's not going well is because it's miscast. And there's almost nothing you can do to get someone out of that. I can't imagine what you would do. You can give notes, local notes. They need to be precise. You can't say, can you give me that again, to an extraordinarily accomplished reader? The person is going to say, well, what in particular was I missing there? Precise direction is always well received, unless you're dealing with somebody who really doesn't like being directed at all. And you will encounter those people.
Do you deal with those people less often, even though the talent may be there? Is that a detriment when they don't like being directed?
I think most people who do make a living out of audiobooks are open to direction. Whether they can actually act on the direction that you're giving is another question. Sometimes you're so accustomed to a particular way of performing something that you're not open to. You don't fully understand what the note is, and that's usually my fault as director and not being able to articulate it, but it can also be idiosyncrasy of the talent themselves.
When do you provide feedback during the read? Do you let it go for you do a day's worth and then feedback's given afterwards? Is it intermittent throughout?
If I'm dealing with a talent with whom I have relatively little relationship and I know that we're going to be pressed for time, the first thing I do is I sit before our recording session and we talk about, well, what do you think about this? And when I say, what do you think about this, it's my own kind of platform for diving into what I think about this. And we kind of get on the same page and, providing that kind of informal
collaboration.
Yeah, absolutely.
Anyone else?
You go first, Jamie.
Okay. I have actually found that a lot of the best narrators want direction, and they're very open to it. I was working with Carol Monda this week, and she loves getting direction. And these are people who've done hundreds of books and are masters at what they do. I was working with Elizabeth Rogers today, and she stops at one point and she's like, am I doing this right? I'm like, I would have stopped you if you weren't. You're great. And then there are people who are a little newer to the scene, and when I try to give them direction, they fight me on it. And don't fight. If you got to this point because you're good, you've got some chops, but we can always be better. And I think that just being able to take a step back and say, okay, I am good. I have talent. I'm good at this. That's why I've got this gig. But I could be better. We could always be better. And just opening yourself up to that.
So I give constant feedback in the studio, which is something when I started directing I didn't do, and I wish I would have done. I was scared to stop people, and I didn't want someone to be upset with me for stopping them when they were in a flow or when they felt they were doing well. And then I was working with an actor on a project and was a little terrified of him. And I said, whatever you want to do, whatever you want to do is totally fine. And he looked me square in the eye and he said, no. You are the director. I am the actor. He said, you tell me what to do. And he wanted that. And this was somebody, like, if you met him on the street, you would be like, oh, excuse me, sorry. And having him say that to me was really an eye-opener for me. So I stop people constantly, especially at the beginning. And one thing that I am always saying to people, no matter who it is and how great they are or how famous they are, is stop, dial it back. You are talking to me, or you're talking to your mom, or you're talking to your best friend who's really smart but just doesn't know the story or doesn't know this thing that you're telling them about. And make it personal because it's so intimate. You're literally in someone's ear. So you're not playing to the back of the room. You're playing right here. It's so close. And remember that and speak to one person and let the words come through and perform them. And do your work, do your research in the beginning, and then step into the booth and let it go. And don't be so heady. Get out of your own head and know that exactly what Jamie was saying. You are a good actor. You got here for a reason. Stop focusing on, am I good? Am I doing this right? And just focus on the performance in front of you.
Great. Let's get some questions from the audience that I see over here. Change it up a little bit, which is how do you find narrators who can do foreign accents or any specific dialect?
Not easily and not often enough. And this is something when I'm casting and I know, Mike and Bruce and Neil at Audible Studios go through this too. It's hard. It's hard to find people, especially there are a couple that are just super hard to find. South African is really tough. Native Australian and Irish and Scottish, those are tough for us, and Eastern European. So those are some that I'll actually reach out to these guys. Hey, do you know anybody who's actually Scottish?
I can do all those accents.
You're hired,
at the same
John.
time.
I don't. What about you guys? Do you have an easier time with that?
Again, I think it's hard, and it is a lot of. We have a built-in network of producers and directors and narrators that we email and we say, "Do you know anybody?" And that's why what we talked about earlier about saying what you can do, being very specific, because if a book comes across Kat's desk and she's like, I need a South African accent, and you were like, I'm great at South African accents, she's going to think of you.
And I'm going to cheer.
Yeah.
honestly.
Yeah.
That's great. I mean, it sounds excellent. I think we've run through every question from the audience. So, I don't know, any last parting words as we come to an end or come near an end of the 6th episodes of ACX University 2016?
Can I thank you guys, who are running ACX University and doing all this behind the scenes work. I mean, it's been a fabulous crew. I've been lucky enough to do 2 panels with you guys this year. Live streaming them has been fun. I like meeting people in person, but this is a blast too. So
We made it seem like we had internet the entire time before this started, and then there was no problems, right?
exactly. No, but I mean,
Seamless.
Mike, thank you, and thanks to Hannah Wall and Scott Jacoby and Emil Dave and his whole crew who've been filming this stuff. You guys have made this easy for us to talk about what we love to do. So thank you so much.
Yeah, it's great. Hannah and Scott specifically, I'm looking at them. So I think this is it. I think we should all come up and take a bow, if you'd like. Nice work, everyone.
Can I steal this?
Make sure to watch all of the 6 episodes of A6 University. We will have them online constantly for your review.
Yeah, they're currently online now on the Audible. Oh, now I'm in the shot? Great. Hi, Kat. How are you? Yeah, they're all online. You can find them at youtube.com/audibleacx. Thank everybody for watching. Hopefully you've all learned some great stuff and feel like you can go out and be a better audiobook producer.
Yeah. Keep the questions coming in. We'll get to them in the blog post or in other means, and we can always catch up with these fine folks here and ask them more questions. So keep them coming. All right.
All right.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks.